What is the role of research in economic development? Well, the world over, there's a correlation between the two because well-grounded economic development must be grounded on proper research. And as a country, we don't have a shortage of researchers as well as well-researched documents, but the problem has always been the implementation of the same. I'll be having this conversation with a professor, with the Vice Chancellor of Management University of Africa, Professor Washington Okeyo. We just want to dive into the world of research and ask ourselves, what is the role of research in socio-economic development, and are we following the script as a country? Good morning, and thank you so very much indeed for joining us. We are on air and of course online. This is BIZ, and my name is O'Brien Kimani. And of course, we are also keeping an eye on the ongoing energy conference where stakeholders are expected to discuss various ways of bringing down the cost of energy in the country, and of course the various policies that need to be employed or to be deployed in order for this to happen. Remember, the government has a target of bringing down the cost of energy by about 30%. So far, 15% has happened. The other 15% is facing serious opposition from independent power producers, and of course we must expect some concession in that regard. And of course, we're also keeping an eye on the politics. Remember, we are hurtling down to the 9th of August, where the country will go into the elections, definitely to choose various leaders, from MCAs to members of parliament, to woman rep, and of course to governors, senators, and the president. We are keeping an eye on what various political actors are saying. My name is O'Brien Kimani. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle, and at KBC Channel 1 is our official Twitter page. You can get in touch with us, and of course let's share the conversation that is coming up next. And of course later on I shall be having another very interesting conversation around the business of nutritional supplements. Oh yeah, it's a growing business. It's also becoming popular here in Kenya, even as more Kenyans, decide to take the healthy route. But we want to find out where are we in terms of consumption, and of course in terms of market expansion in regard to diet supplements. We are having that conversation here. But for now, we go to the big conversation on the role of research in economic development. Remember, Professor Washington Okeyo is in the house. See you shortly. Well, as a country, we have a dalliance with research, going back many decades ago. And of course, one of the most talked about research document is, of course, the sessional paper number 10 of 1965 on economic development and social development as well. We have gone ahead, and brought about or developed even other more critical documents on how to develop ourselves as an economy and, of course, socially. And that's a conversation we want to have it right here. And I'm joined by Washington Okeyo. He's a Vice Chancellor of Management University of Africa. He's Professor Washington Okeyo. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Prof, I want to get your thoughts on the whole concept of research. How is it interlinked with socio-economic development?
Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you very much again for having me in the studio this morning. As you mentioned, my name is Professor Washington Okeyo. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Management University of Africa. Touching on the topic of the day, the role of research in economic development. Probably we start from the other end, economic development, so that you put it into context. Mm-hmm. What is economic development? I think it's important for us to understand before even we move into how research delves into economic development. The economy is the activities of a country that are within the borders of a country. And obviously, these activities are what are intended to spur and improve the health of the individuals, importantly the citizens of that particular country, so that they can live healthy lives. So that is basically the essence of economic development. Now, In Kenya, we have different sectors of the economy, and we know them. We have manufacturing, where we have a lot of production issues. We have the social sector, where we have education, we have health, and so on and so forth. And there are very, very many. So all those in totality form the Kenyan economy. Now, many as they are, it is important for us to see how we can spur the development of these different sectors of economy, which in totality then will give us a feel of what the Kenyan economy looks like. And because there are so many factors playing in the field of economy, or Kenyan economy as it were, this is where research comes in. Because we look at the environment in which these economic factors play. That environment is one of, first and foremost, it is a very dynamic environment which changes every so often. It's got so many factors, and because of that, we need to understand that environment before even we can, for example, starting a business. If one wants to start a business, how would one start a business without knowing the impact or the effect of these various economic factors on his or her business? And that is where research comes in very handily, because you have to carry out research in terms of feasibility studies, in terms of looking at the various parameters which your business will be impacted by or will be affected by. And once you do the research, then you will know how these various factors are likely to affect your business, and then you take various precautions. For example, if you are looking at the human resource that you need for your business, then you need to know what is the human resource base in the country. Do you have adequate expertise and knowledgeable people to be able to run your business when you start it? If you are looking at technology, for example, do you have adequate technology to be able to that you're going to use in your business? If it is not present in Kenya, then you have to import it from outside. And are you prepared to do that as a business person? And so that is really the role of research. It is basically to unravel certain uncertainties which must be unraveled for somebody to start a business or for somebody to run a business in an economic environment.
You know, when you look at us as a country, Prof, and I know that you've been around for a long time, are you convinced that our socio-economic development model is grounded on research?
Yes, that's a good question, O'Brien, and I think I would say yes and no. In terms of how much is yes and how much is no, that's a point of debate. But when you're introducing this, you mentioned about the sessional paper number 10 of 1965. And I think that blueprint is where we started as a country. Now, and that was a very well-researched blueprint paper, which was meant to transfer the economic empowerment from the then foreigners, because then our economy was directly in the hands of the foreigners, to the indigenous people. And the question we want to ask is, down the line, several decades, how much of that have we achieved? Have we managed to transfer the economy to the indigenous people of Kenya? That's a point of debate. There is a part of it which has been transferred, a significant part. But is it helping the indigenous people the way it was meant to help? And that, again, is a point of debate. It isn't helping as much as the indigenous people would like it to help them. And perhaps some of the reasons are because we are not employing the techniques of research, in order to come up with various avenues, various areas of investment, various, business to start, and how to run them, importantly. I think there's a bit of that going on, but it is not going on enough. For example, universities like our university, we have different levels of teaching, obviously. We have diploma, we have undergraduate, we have masters or postgraduate, and then we have PhD. And at all these levels, there are researches that are being done by our students. At the university level, We of course do academic research that our students ought to do so that they are grounded on the theoretical aspect of research or of things. But also we also stress or emphasize the applied research. And applied research is the research which is used to identify solutions to economic problems in the society, in the communities. And what we do is that our students, we encourage them and make sure that they go out and look at what problems are plaguing the economy, what problems are plaguing the communities, what problems are plaguing the society. And then they model their researches around, those problems. And importantly, once they do the researches, we encourage them to go back, to those communities, to the societies, to the economy, and implement their research findings. So that there is that loop that is created by getting problems plaguing the economy and then carrying out research to find out the solutions, and then going back to the community, to the society, to implement those solutions.
Mm-hmm. Like now, the whole country is really focused on the 9th of August elections, and we're going to elect thousands of people to represent us, its various levels, be it members of parliament, women reps, senators, governors, and so forth. But the question that is now coming is, we are going to spend billions of shillings, on this event. Is it being guided by research?
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario because first of all, coming from our university, which is a leadership and management focused university, that is actually the main role of or focus of the Management University of Africa. So we teach leadership. And in leadership, we have political leadership, we have business leadership and other leadership styles. And one thing that is for sure is that the political leadership are very interested in the development of the economy or economic development per se. And even as they sell their ideas, as they sell their manifestos, as they sell their ideologies, most of them are actually anchoring them on economic development. As to how much research has been done for them to end up with the proposals that they're making to the Kenyan people, that is a point of debate because I'm not involved in that. But for them to come up with the manifestos that they are selling, to the people, there should be some element of research that they have undertaken, because, for example, the different types of economic models that are being proposed. Some people are proposing the bottom-up economy, some people are proposing the top-bottom economy, some people are proposing the mixed model, and so on and so forth. And these are economic models which are based on research, and there are theories that drive these various economic models. So I should imagine that before somebody starts talking about top-bottom economy or bottom-up economy, they must be grounded in that area, and that some research must have been done. So that is my belief. But it's a point of debate, and the blueprints that they have come up with are blueprints which have got the various proposals that they make, that they're proposing to implement, and even how they will implement them. So I believe that is coming out of some level of research.
Mm-hmm. And as we even get into the process of deciding who is going to be in charge of leadership in this country, at various levels, what is the role of research in helping us identify the people who should be in charge of political leadership, of economic leadership, of social leadership in this country?
Yes, I think research cascades very, very deep into the society. And definitely political leadership, as we are looking at it, is a leadership that ought to provide the direction where the society would like to go. And obviously, we have our constitution, which basically guides where our society is meant to go, or rather from which we develop models which guide where our economy is supposed to go to. Now, in terms of identifying leadership, I would say the role of research would be sort of trying to determine the different types of leadership styles and leadership models that we as a country need at the moment. Because there is a stage of development that we are as a country. And there are different leadership styles that may spur economic growth and economic development in this country. There are others which may not spur it. And so, for example, we have, transformative leadership style, which leads people to a given direction based on, involving those people. We have autocratic leadership style, which basically is dictatorial. We have a situational leadership style, which basically is the type of situation that a country is in. That is what the leader himself adopts. And based on the broad definition of leadership as it is, that a leader ought to lead people to a predefined destination, and that these people must be willing for them to be led there. So it is important for us to apply the research concepts to be able to identify the kind of leaders that can lead us to where we want, the destination that Kenya would like to be in the next 5 years, for example. As to whether that is happening, that is a matter of debate, because we know politics is a rather queer sort of involvement and engagement, because it begins by personal interest before even the community and the society in general can say, yes, that is the political leader that we want. If I want to be in politics, I must raise my head up and raise my hand up and say, I would like to lead you people. So there could be a very good leader down there who hasn't raised his head up and has not expressed interest in being a political leader. So he will never be, despite the fact that he can be a very good leader. So research has got its limitations when it comes to identifying individuals and proposing individuals. Yes, that can be done, but as to whether those individuals would be interested in taking up the role that they have been identified for, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I mean, in 2010, we promulgated a new constitution. 2020 was the first decade of the new constitution. Then in 2013, we got into a new political dispensation of devolved units and new members of parliament. I mean, new political style in terms of senators, governors, and so much. But as a country, do you think, or do you believe that we have taken time now to look at the last 10 years of new constitution and devolution and analyzed it and researched on it and asked ourselves hard questions on how we progress to the next 10 years?
Yeah, thank you very much. And the 2010 constitution was touted to be one of the best constitutions in Africa, if not in the world, because it is very progressive in terms of its content and form. And so in terms of measuring the performance of that constitution, it is really the responsibility of the government to determine whether the constitution is performing or is delivering what it was meant to deliver. But having said that, at university level, what do we do?
No, but I still have, a question. I mean, when you say it's just the role of the government,
yes,
I don't think this is a role that should just be left purely to the government. I think we have the academia, we have researchers, as well, to try and also prop up this kind of conversations and also push the government into action.
Exactly, and thank you very much. That's a point that I was trying to bring in when I was talking about at university level. level, what exactly do we do? What we do at university level is we look at a variety of things, and 2010 Constitution is one of the items that have been very, very, very researched in terms of its performance, in terms of whether it has delivered, what it has delivered in the last 12 years, as it were. And there are various interesting results which have come out. It's being talked about because one of the main things about 2010 Constitution is the devolution. Yeah, that is what it brought in. That has spurred a lot of economic activities at the county level, and we have seen several researches and several reports on how different counties are performing in the environment of devolution, and this varies from different counties, from one county to another. There are counties definitely which have performed way better than others and have improved the social facilities like hospitals. There are so many markets that have been constructed in various counties, and there are so many road networks that have been developed and so on and so forth. And a lot of economic uplifting has been done at the county level. So in that regard, one would say that yes, there's quite a huge chunk that has been done in some counties. Of course, it depends on the management in terms of the leadership of those counties, the governance system, starting from the governor going downwards. There are counties, obviously, which are, and I don't have the statistics of what each and every county has done. But yes, to a certain extent, the 2010 Constitution, in terms of devolution, has really impacted positively in the counties at that level.
But then, if and it's good that you brought about that issue of yes. There is a lot of research, in the academia sphere that is being conducted, to try and understand what is the best socio-economic development model for this country. Because we must accept this fact. I mean, we must develop policies and documents, that suit the bigger picture of development in this country. But how much of that research being developed by the academia is being cascaded into the national economic blueprint in Kenya?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, you asked which would be the best economic model, for this country. Even before we go to how research is being disseminated for implementation. Basically, there's a continuum. In economics, there's a continuum of economic models, and you can look at the opposing ones, the top-bottom, and then the bottom-up economic model, basically. And then you can have, a degree of a mixture of those two. Now, the top-bottom economic model is the one that looks at the bigger picture of the economy. It looks at the macroeconomic factors, for example, the fiscal factors. It looks at the inflation. It looks at the production, in totality at that level. And so it comes up with blueprints, basically looking at if those conditions are right, and defines what that right means, then this is where one should channel their investments towards, based on those factors, macroeconomic factors. Then there is the other side of the divide, which is the bottom-up economic model, which is basically looking at the economy at microeconomic level. At microeconomic level, that is where you have consumption, supply and demand issues, coming in. So basically, you are looking at the performance of the individual, or the activities of the individual companies, if you like, and also activities. So, and then you lack the bigger picture. When you focus more on the bottom-up economy, you actually lack the bigger picture. So you're sort of saying that we need to look at how these small businesses are going to develop, and then sell their products, and then to satisfy the local supply and demand requirements. But then there are those macroeconomic factors which affect how these particular small businesses will work. And that is what needs to be brought into perspective. So to answer the question, which is the best, there's no wrong or right answer here. Mm-hmm. There's no best or not best. It is a mixture of the two. Because for the top bottom to work, they need to know what is happening on the ground. Mm-hmm. They need to know the microeconomic conditions and factors for them to be able to know where to channel the investments to. And again, for the bottom up to work, they need to know the macroeconomic factors like the tax regime of a country, the fiscal, the inflation, how it is going to affect, their activities, so that they know how to channel their investment, when to do it, and so on and so forth. Now, going back to the second part of your question, how is research, being implemented, by the government and so on? In universities like my university, the Management University of Africa, we do quite a huge chunk of research, and being a leadership and management university, our research touches on economic issues, it touches on leadership issues, touches on management issues, and other developmental issues. And we do quite a chunk of this research. Some of them we do in collaboration with the industry, the government, and other companies outside, outside the academia. But some of them we do purely as academic, exercise, which sort of is meant to ensure that our students get the correct academic or the right academic, angle of their education. But the ones which are more interesting for this discussion are the ones that we do in collaboration with the industry and other players outside the academia. Now, when we do those kind of research, there are two or three things that we come up with. One, we come up with issues to do with policies. What sort of policies are required in a specific area to be able to spur the developments and the activities that are happening or that ought to happen in that particular area. So we advise the government at that level that for this particular situation to manifest properly, so that it can lead to economic development, to help improve the health of the indigenous people, these are the policies that you need to have in place. And we have done that. We have done that at the level of the small businesses. We have done that across the sectors, like the manufacturing, like the service sector, like the also technology sector, and so on, and all the other sectors of the economy. Now, but before we do that, how do we get into this partnership and to identify? Obviously, the government has got its own priority areas where they would like to sort of delve into and to find out what policies they need to produce. So they get in touch and then they advise, they ask the universities, we have this particular project in this particular area. We will need some information about it. We would like to get into partnership so that you can help us carry out some research and then advise on what kind of policies we need.
Very good.
That is on the side of the government and the policies. In terms of now the individual players in the industry, we also have the companies that operate, for example, in the manufacturing, for example, in the service, for example, in the technology area. We also partner with these companies. And when we partner with these companies, the results, and there are various different types of needs that these companies have that we carry out research based on. Some of them we end up with internal policies now for the industries, not for the government. And then we also identify the practices which are kind of touted as best practices in that particular industry, so that when a company is looking at what kind of culture should it adopt, then we advise them that this is the kind of culture that you need to adopt as a company.
Yeah. When you look at the last 10 years, the country has almost tripled the number of universities in this country. But has this also tripled the number of research papers in this country?
That's an interesting question. Yes, it's true. The number of universities has grown significantly, and right now we have an odd number of about 74 universities in this country. Half of them are public universities and half of them are private universities. Of course, there are different sizes of universities. And given that the mandate of a university is threefold, there is the one which is on the side of teaching, and then there's the other one which is on the side of research, and then there is the one which is on the side of community development. So it is threefold. That is the management. The mandate of any university in this country. So in terms of research, each university does research at at different levels. Like I said, in my university, the Management University of Africa, we carry out research starting from diploma level to undergraduate all the way to master's and PhD. And depending on the level, the research that is being done could be complex or less complex. Obviously, the lower the level, the less complex the research is. The higher the level, the more complex it is. So PhD researchers looks more at the real issues plaguing the country and plaguing the economy. And because the number of universities have nearly tripled, as you said, in fact more than tripled, the research results that are coming out of the PhD programs are very, very relevant, which are very, very relevant, have also multiplied almost at the same at the same rate as the number of universities.
Yeah.
So indeed, there have been so many that have come up, and at the master's level, the researches that are being done at the master's level are researches which I would say focus more on specific companies.
Yeah.
For example, in my university, most of the researches that our students do at master's level focus on specific companies. For example, Safaricom, for example, Airtel, for example, EABL, so that they look at various aspects of within those companies, and then they carry out their research and advise those companies on how those companies can improve their services, can improve their production, can improve their products, and so on and so forth.
Research is just one aspect of this whole concept, but the world is now talking about research and development. How do you research, and then after researching, you develop, that your research, and you develop it into something else? And, the world is inspired by the two biggest economies in the world, and I'm talking about the United States and I'm talking about China. The two countries, when you look at their research funding or R&D, what we call research and development funding, it's more than 10% of their GDP. And when you're talking about 10% of their GDP, when you look at, for example, United States, an economy of almost $20 trillion US, when you look at China, an economy of almost $17 trillion US, you're talking about significant resources. But their investment is paying off because these are countries that are coming up with cutting-edge technology. But when you come to Kenya, our funding to the R&D sector is less than 1%. A lot of people will tell you it's about 0.8%, but the numbers, keep on changing. As a country, do you think we are very committed, or we are taking the question of research and development with the level of seriousness that it deserves?
Very interesting observation indeed. And it is true that the countries that you mentioned, the US, United States of America, China, have allocated significant chunks of their budget towards research, and it is actually being utilized because they come up with research areas which are actually that money is being utilized towards, and you can see the gains that they're having. If you look at US, for example, which started way back in 1776, look at the level of economic development in the US. I don't think you can compare it to what we're going through, we have in Africa, Kenya in particular. Look at their road networks and so on and so forth. They've got, huge, expansive and elaborate road networks, and these are the panacea for basically economic growth. But how did they get there? I think, like you said, they have done quite a bit of serious research to be able to know exactly what they need to do and which areas they need to do them. Obviously, at our country's level, Kenya, we cannot compare in terms of magnitude to what those people do. But we can also initiate ours and know how we can benefit from them in the first place. And so it is a matter of priority for the government. It is a matter of priority for the government because research is fundamental. There's no country, there's no organization, there's no area which can develop without research, because development is looking at the future. And the future is always uncertain. You don't know what is in the future. And for you to plan for the future, then you have to come up with models which are properly simulated based on different scenarios, so that you can say if scenario A manifests in the future, this is the model that we shall use. If scenario B is the one that manifests, this is the one that we shall use. And that can only come through research and development. As to why or how much the government is allocating towards research and development in this country, that is a matter of figures, yeah, and they are there. I think the government needs to increase the amount of money that is being allocated to research in this particular country, so that we can assign, because the absence of that, let me just say that the absence of that is what now leads us to copying what is being done elsewhere and then pasting it in our country. Not knowing that those people researched these models that we're copying, they researched it based on their own environment for their own countries. They are not researched for Kenya. But because we are not producing our own original models, then we are forced to copy from there. And the end result is that we don't get what we expect to get.
You see, the world of, there seems to be some concurrence when it comes to, the amount of funds that should be allocated to research and development. And rich countries will talk about 5% of their GDP. In Africa, we still do not have that figure because we are yet to research, on our own.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in this, a lot of researchers will tell you that if we can dedicate about between 2 and 3% of our GDP to research and development, then the payoff will be significant. Do you agree with them that we need to have between 2 or 3% of our GDP dedicated to research?
Yes. I think I start from the university level. What do we do at the university level? We allocate between 2 and 10% of our total income, our budget. 2 to 10% goes to research. That is the allocation that we have. And we ensure that we utilize that allocation as a university to carry out researches which are meaningful, towards solving societal problems. And based on that, in the Management University of Africa, we have set up an innovation and incubation center, which is the center for research and development. And basically, we have a way of enticing and encouraging our students to bring in ideas. It's basically a student-centered center where students bring in the ideas. The ideas are processed and sieved, and then they are developed, incubated, and then after that, they are commercialized. The ones which meet the commercial, threshold are then commercialized. And that is the model which the government needs to adopt. Obviously, the government's case will be a lot more complex because there are different sectors of the economy, you are talking about health, and even at those different sectors, you also have different subsectors. So it is something that the government must do. because and again I go back to the 1965 sessional paper number 10 on socioeconomic development. There are various things, and subsequent to that there have been so many other sessional papers. I think, yeah, more than 10 or 20 sessional papers, and all of them are talking about economic development. These cannot be achieved without targeted research. And for the government to achieve targeted research, there is need for the government to allocate adequate budget towards research. But not only allocating adequate research towards research, the government needs to create policies that support research. Because without a policy framework, even if you have a budget, it cannot be spent the way it's supposed to be, to benefit. And then after that, the government needs to create institutions for research. I know there are so many institutions that the government has created. For example, in the agricultural sector, you have, in the industrial sector, you have places like Kirdi, you have ILRI, you have so many of them which are carrying out government research.
Mm-hmm. Even though ILRI is international, it's an international organization.
Yeah, some of these are international organizations, so the government sort of partner with these people, with these organizations. On the government side, there is need to, for the government to actively identify how they can support research and development in this country, because that is the only way that this country can achieve its goals into the future.
It's proper that you have brought the issue of entities that are involved in the research field, and we don't have a shortage of the same.
Yeah.
We have research organizations like Kenya Institute of Research Development, that is KIRDI.
Yeah.
We have Kenya Medical Research Institute, that is KEMRI. We have Kenya Forestry Research Institute. We have Marines and Research. There are so many, including coffee research, tea research. But when you look at their funding, more than 50% of their funding, comes from the development partners or donors, if you like it.
Yeah.
And so you have a situation whereby the government is more involved in funding the recurrent expenditure. But when it comes to the capital expenditure, it's purely left to the development communities. And of course, they come with their own interest, as it were. So how do we empower these research institutions to ensure that they are well funded and they are well equipped and capacitated to come up with world-class research and innovations?
Yes, I think the onus now should rest on the individual organizations and institutes themselves. If they were not created, then it would be a point for the government. If they were not yet created, it would be a point for the government to see how they can create these different institutes. But now that those institutes exist, it is upon the institutes themselves to map out what research activities they need to do at KIRDI level, at KEMRI level, at other levels. Yeah? So that they can come up with proposals and blueprints of what research activities they need to get involved in, and then how much that would cost. And then they make the proposals to the government. And then the government should then look at how much, because the government's hands are also, tied. Mm-hmm. There are so many competing interests that the government budget, ought to serve. And based on these competing interests, I believe the government can look at, how to prioritize the various competing interests, and then prioritize research and development, particularly support of these institutes based on their contribution to the development of the country, and then put them up in the priority of, budget allocation list, and allocate them appropriate money for their research and development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, I mean, we've spent the last 45 or so minutes discussing the issue of socio-economic development, and one thing that is coming out clearly is that it is critical. It cannot be overlooked if as a country we're going to develop, then we must deploy significant resources in terms of funds, in terms of human resource, in research and development. And we are in the company of Professor Washington Okeyo. He's a Vice Chancellor of Management University of Africa. Your input is highly appreciated, because I'm about to give you my Twitter handle, which is at KBC, at O'Brien Kimani, and at KBC. The good old professor, do you have a Twitter handle as well, where people can interact with you?
Yeah, I don't remember it often. So we may use you as
Prof. You need to have a Twitter handle. So the conversation continues from here, and of course, remember you're watching BIZ Week. I mean, the Business Check, and we are live from Broadcasting House. Let's move on to now where we are and what we need to do. So, going forward, how do we integrate research in our socio-economic planning and ensure that it is followed, it is well documented and well researched for the benefit of this country?
Yes, thank you very much, O'Brien. The socio-economic planning is one of the most fundamental issues for a government, and the government of Kenya is definitely into that. And for socio-economic planning to be effective, it must take into account the various aspects of the needs and wants of the citizens of the country. Mm-hmm. And those needs and wants basically are based on the different sectors of the economy. For example, there is the social sector, there is the the other sectors of the economy, which basically affect their citizens directly. And because there are so many factors that play in these different sectors, it would be impossible, if not very difficult, to come up with a plan on how to develop the economy without carrying out research. And so it is imperative, because it is only through research that you can find out, for example, and use, say, past statistics, past performance data, to look at what happened in different scenarios. During those, in the past, there could have been, the various factors affecting the economy. Like right now, I think a good example to give is the political environment that we have now. We have had different presidential elections in the past. What has been their impact on the economy? Because for us to now plan on how we can manage the economy based on what is going on, we need to base it on the fact. And then we can use that to project how it is going to happen in the future. And so it affects the education sector, it affects the health sector, it affects the manufacturing, it affects the technology, all the other sectors of the economy. So it would be imperative. It's important to have the aspect of research carried out, even as we come out or try to come out with the different broader areas that we need to focus on, and even specific areas at different levels in our country.
Mm-hmm. And it's true. I mean, you've just said it. I mean, when you look at the World Bank rankings of, the effectiveness of implementation of various research and development, Kenya ranks poorly in terms of rollout and deployment of those researches. But in terms of developing research concept, I mean, it is ranked very highly, actually, as one of the top 100 in the world. So how do we match the number of research research documents that are being produced by our researchers, and the number and the effectiveness of applying that research in our day-to-day life, in our economy, in our social development?
One question that comes to mind when looking at that is we have so many research papers and therefore research output. Are those many research papers and output relevant to our economy. That could explain the reason why probably there isn't so much of it being implemented. And it takes me back to the point which I mentioned that earlier, that if one wants to carry out research in a particular area which is going to involve the government, then they need to involve the government from the word go in the first place. Because if you don't involve the government has got its own priorities. Okay, you may be researching on an issue which definitely would have an effect, whose results would have an effect on the country's economy, but if it is not there in the government blueprint, for example, there'll be no space for it to be implemented. There'll be no budget for it to be implemented. So before one does research, it is important to look at the priorities that the government has. If you're doing, research in an area which is going to, which you expect the government to come in and do the implementation. But on the other hand, there are development partners from, overseas and other places, which come with their own areas which they want to focus on. So much as they partner with the government, but the government just gives the approval that it's okay, go ahead and focus your efforts or channel your efforts towards that area. So in that scenario, then it is the development partners who then have a say in what areas they want to focus on and whether research should be done in those areas or not. And they actually recruit researchers, so that those researchers can give them baseline data to find out, what is important in those particular areas. And then after that, they can go into full-blown research to establish solutions to problems that plague people in that particular area. Yeah.
When you look at Kenya, our socio-economic development is guided by Vision 2030, which was launched back in the year 2008. Of course, we have not been very faithful, to following through, the aspirations of Vision 2030. And of course, there has been deviations with serious consequences. So going forward, how do we safeguard and how do we keep on reviewing the aspirations of Vision 2030 to ensure that, number one, they are well aligned with the emerging realities in the world, and number two, that the people who are put in place to shepherd and to drive the aspirations of Vision 2030 are aligned to those realities?
Yes, thank you very much. One of the most important issues in implementing sort of these blueprints like Vision 2030 and others, and we even had Vision 2020, I think, okay, and we also have the Constitution itself, which is the bigger sort of framework. One of the most important things to look at, which would lead to the success of these implementations, is the institutions. Do we have proper and well-empowered institutions to be able to implement these blueprints? Because I say this because Vision 2030, for example, is a government blueprint. So, and we know that governments change. With time, after every 5 years, we have different governments. So is the incoming government, for example, in favor of that particular blueprint? The only way that we can ensure that happens is if we empower the institutions that are meant to implement these blueprints, and also empower them by creating policies, government policies, which will then drive the process, so that they are anchored in, so that the subsequent governments that come in place can continue. There can be a continuation in terms of implementation of what has already been started, rather than trashing it and then coming out with some different things. Obviously, there will always be the temptation because as time goes by, for example, Vision 2030 was created several years ago, and the time has gone by. Perhaps the assumptions which were made at that time when it was being created, some of the assumptions did not manifest. Different assumptions sort of came out, and when that happens, one wonders what is the effectiveness of the original Vision 2030 blueprint, for example. So I think the approach that should be done is there should be a review And in most instances, when you're implementing projects, when implementing, blueprints, at some point, maybe quarter way through, you do a review of the progress that has been made, and then you look at the obtaining environment, and then look at what are the factors that are affecting or that have affected the implementation, and how have they affected it either negatively or positively. Then what do we need to do to change those, the blueprint itself, include certain aspects, which then going forward, then we'll make sure that it is still on course of its implementation and likely to deliver the benefits for which it was developed. Unless and until that is done, it is impossible to implement something which was developed 10 years ago and still, claim that it is still giving the same intended benefits that it was programmed to give in the beginning. And that is probably why, when you say that there have been variants of other issues, being implemented, which are different from the original blueprint, that is most likely the reason, because the incoming leadership has seen that the original blueprint was channeling the country to a particular direction, but now the factors that are obtaining were not good enough for that blueprint to be implemented the way it was designed, and therefore the big four agendas come in. But my thinking is that anything that comes should be anchored on the blueprint.
Very well.
It should be the blueprint that is being sort of relooked at to see how you can incorporate the emerging issues.
Good.
Yeah.
Prof, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and of course sharing with us, your knowledge on research and development issues. And of course, it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll be tapping your knowledge going forward on these issues.
Thank you very much, O'Brien.
Asante sana.
I appreciate.
Well, we've been talking matters research and development with Professor Washington Okeyo. He is the Vice Chancellor of Management University of Africa, joining us this morning to help us understand what is the role of research and development in Kenya's socio-economic development. And of course, you have heard it from him. This is BIZ Check. We are live from Broadcasting House. Our next conversation is around the business of dietary supplements, not only here in Kenya, but around the world. Stay here for that conversation.